We are lighting the candle, and this week we've got a little bit different look, but let me just kind of refresh your memory on what we're here to do. About 2.5 years ago, I started up this podcast with a whole notion of bringing some empowerment to folks out there around the country who might need it, around the world for that matter. So if you're within the sound of my voice, our whole point is to give you a way to get back from whatever's bothering you today to whatever state of bliss you'd like to be in, and quite frankly, help you help other people around you. And so if you want more information on that sort of thing, you can go back and listen to all of our prior broadcasts. Let me take a moment and just identify. I'm Bill Correll. I've been doing this for a while, and I've got with me for the second time a very special co-host this week, Kate Mollison. And Kate is in the business of grief and more or less helping people get through bereavement and that sort of thing. And as a result of that, a lot of what we're going to be talking about has to do with where are you having stress in your life? What do you consider fun? How do you get a positive way, access to dopamine and endorphins and all those other chemicals in your body that lift you up and make you a very effective and great person. So I want to just, when we get started here, I want to ask you at home to really give us your attention and listen for something that's going to make a difference for you when this is over. Our goal is to give you empowerment, and how we're going to find out if that's working or not. One or both of us is going to end up with goosebumps before this whole thing is over. We Exactly. You're in for a ride, Kate. So the point is that if we're empowered, we kind of feel like you're empowered too, and that's what we want to know. And since you're not going to listen to this until later, we're going to have to think into the future and imagine what your questions are, and of course, we're going to follow those questions where they may lead. But first, let me just take a moment. Kate, would you like to tell people a little bit more about yourself before we get, talking about how people can access empowerment and getting back to an unstressed lifestyle?
Sure, absolutely. And first of all, thanks for having me back for a second time, Bill. It's always a pleasure to sit and chat with you. I always walk away from our conversations, both in podcast, in person, and otherwise, feeling like I've learned something and feeling like I'm back, my feet are back on the ground. So I'm definitely grateful for you and your positivity. My name is Kate Mollison, and I am a grief and bereavement specialist and the owner and operator of On Tuesdays We Wear Black. It is a grief consulting company where I work with both businesses and individuals around understanding how to relate grief into bereavement in the workspace. So it's about just leaving the grief landscape better than how we found it. And a big part of that is in processing grief and understanding the science behind it and using it to be a power versus a barrier and choosing joy in our everyday lives. So loss is not necessarily death, but it's, any intrinsic significant life change. And there's grief associated with all of those changes. But with grief comes the ability to experience joy in a way we may not have otherwise had access to. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Same here. Anytime we can be around Joy, she's a good cook and she throws great parties, and quite and I love Joy a lot, and quite frankly, all of us are in the middle of many opportunities a day to have a sense of internal loss. Sometimes it's just as simple as listening to what's going on the TV and headlines and all of that sort of thing.
Mm.
But one of the neat things that I've found, and I think Kate, you can probably have a few things to say about this as well, is that how you get access, to a state change, if you will, that whatever you're feeling and whatever is going on, that you'd like to move from and to something else, you have to first of all acknowledge that's where you are. And
Mm.
like right now, I'm really maybe not having the best day ever, and how committed can I be to having the best day ever? Because guess what? It's up to you and me. We get to choose for ourselves in any moment whether to stay there, and that's okay, or whether not to stay there. And most people don't realize that there's a switch that you can actually flip and
Well,
go
I
from.
think
Go
sorry, I
ahead.
didn't mean to cut you off. I think a lot of people get hung up on the what, trying to label what the feeling is or what the cause is or what the solution is even, instead of just acknowledging and allowing. You don't have to have the vernacular or the verbiage to go this feeling is X, but to just know this isn't how I want to feel, and what are some changes I can do. I always tell my clients and my friends, control the controllables. You cannot change other people, but you can change the way that you react to other people or other situations. And how do you make that conscious concerted effort to do different? And as my late husband always used to say, if nothing changes, then nothing changes.
I like that. I like that. And there's another old saying also that basically says, as you're resisting whatever it is that's going on in your life that you don't want to experience, there is nothing going on in your life right now other than what you're thinking about it and how your thinking is manifesting. So there's an old saying that basically says, if you want to change the direction of a horse, you got to ride it the direction it's going first.
I
And
like
when you,
that.
yeah,
We could exchange colloquialisms all day, I'm sure.
I hope so. I think we're not more than 20 or 30 cliches per hour. Okay,
Something like that, yeah.
but sometimes it's like a fortune cookie can convey a lot in just a few words, and that's kind of a good thing. But so if we were going to examine for a second the the model, um, or the metaphor of riding a horse the direction that it's going, sometimes all that is just taking a few moments. And as Kate said, you don't have to name what's going on in your body, because guess what, when you name it, a lot of times the next thought you have is, no, it's not that. you know
And I know, like,
so,
for me, I find comfort in, lack of ambiguity. Like, the more ambiguous it is, the more uncomfortable I am. But that's a skill set to practice that helps you move through joy, is to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, to just allow and take and hold that space. It's why I practice mindfulness and I do body scans and sensory scans, like 5 things I see, 4 things I hear, 3 things I feel, 2 things I touch, 1 thing I taste, and I'll like walk myself through that to do a grounding, and then I can come back and be like, okay, doesn't matter what exactly I'm feeling, but I'm feeling something and I don't like it. So what can I do with one of those 5 senses to change how I'm feeling? Whether it's go for a walk or get something to eat. Maybe I just need a Snickers, I'm hangry, or drink some water. We're all always surprised that just drinking water has such a huge impact on our lives and our bodies and our happiness. I'm like, well, you are 70% of it. So sometimes we just need to replenish it. you know Getting a squeeze from a loved one, or a pet or something, just those little things that don't feel like a lot sometimes are enough to shake the sheets and at least give you the momentum to ride the horse in the right direction.
I like it. See, so you get brownie points and you get extra credit if you can use the same cliche in the next answer.
Well, here's the best one though, too. If you are riding the horse in the right direction, you're not facing backwards. You have to stop looking in reverse in order to move forward. You're not sitting backwards on that saddle. You've got to turn around and face forward towards whatever it is you're feeling. Uncomfortable as it may be, sometimes going into it headlong is the hardest but most beneficial thing that you can do. Stop looking back. There's nothing back there for you. We're not headed in that direction. You got to look where you're going.
Yeah, and a corollary metaphor is, you have a huge window in front of you in the car. That front window is so big, and yet the rear view mirror is so small. And the reason for
Mm.
that is which information is more important to you. If you're at a stoplight or a railroad crossing, you need to watch what's going on in the rear view mirror too. Otherwise, you're concentrating on what's out in front of you. And to do that is to more or less take in, and let's go back and like see if we can wrap that mindfulness conversation around this as well. What is mindfulness to you, Kate?
It's being present, being aware of you right now in the moment. So, and that's why I do that grounding exercise. Mindfulness, everyone thinks is, hokum for lack of a better term, but it really is just being mindful, being aware. We always coach our kids in school to like, oh, be mindful of people around you. Well, it's the same thing. Just have yourself tell yourself to be mindful. So being aware of how the chair feels under your body and how it's supporting you and how your feet feel on the ground, and are you experiencing any pain in your body, and how the clothing feels to your skin. Those things that create sensory awareness are actually scientifically proven to be great anxiety reducers, but also just help you tap into those serotonin and dopamine chemicals which unlock joy, because you're not focused on the production of the stress hormone, the cortisol hormone.
I like it. And the other thing is that I've heard it languaged as intentional noticing.
Yes.
So you will notice the things that capture your attention while you're busy doing something else. But this is starts out as an art, and then it becomes kind of a discipline, and then it becomes kind of a habit that you can form that's really, really good for you. And that is where you do sit down and intentionally take note of everything that's around you, up to and including to looking straight ahead and then visually grasping what's going on out at the edges. While you're looking ahead, you're seeing what's happening out at your periphery, and you're able to now actually experience that, and what's ahead of you is going to kind of disappear as your concentration is looking out to the sides. So you've got six senses to do that. Some say the sixth one doesn't get engaged anywhere nearly enough, but that's the one where you and I communicate with the universe and we don't have to say anything. And
Yes,
that
that energy, that, and that's what people, people will be like, oh, well, that's just meditation. No, meditation is far different than mindfulness. And while I personally believe meditation is super helpful, mindfulness is more about being present physically and emotionally in your body. Meditation is about allowing you to check out of your physical body and tap into your mind and dig deeper that way. So, just to clarify those two concepts for our listeners, but mindfulness is important in unlocking joy because you have to be able to move through those physical manifestations, whether they be grief, whether they be anger, whether they be resentment, whether they be, sadness, whatever they are, they have physical manifestations. And so being able to recognize them in your body and then allow them to move through will not only alleviate them, but it opens up the opportunity for you to experience joy.
Yes, and sometimes while you're in the present, you're manifesting the present.
Yes, it is
There
a
is,
present if you think about it.
yeah, right. It's a gift, right?
Exactly. You like my little play on words there.
I always love your play on words. So the remarkable thing about it is that there's so much about this life that you and I get to choose, but we don't know it.
Mm,
We don't live as if there's access to choice there. And when you take the time really to examine and be present, what you're really doing is you're making a difference with who you are personally.
mm.
You're now more in touch with your entire environment through all those senses. And if you take a 5 minute period once a day and use that to just go through a cycle, as Kate, I think you spelled out a really good one, and that's to use each one of your senses one after the other. Get up, walk around, touch things, taste them, smell, look, listen, all that good stuff. You can design your own self therapy and self care that allows you to get to a state of calm. It allows you to get a state of fresh, stress free presence in the moment.
Say
That,
that 10 times fast.
no kidding, try to say it once. I struggled with it. So the whole idea here is what can you do about you when you can't ask the audience or phone a friend, right?
Yeah, you have to. be your own maker. It's an alchemy thing. And I always preach alchemy in all of my various facets of things I do. Um, but I always say, and I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, nothing is still a choice. Everything we do, everything we have is a choice. You have a choice in everything. And once you learn that and you can really use that as a power and become empowered by it,
Yeah.
then you start to drive the bus versus sit in the back seat. And we are programmed as a culture to have a victim mentality and to assume that things are byproducts. But really, we are a product of our own choosing. And so I love that five senses exercise because I have chronic PTSD, and it is a really great way to like circumvent an anxiety attack or to reduce triggers or just in general, like even if I'm not triggered, to just have a like a baseline. If I'm starting the day, I don't journal. Some people journal, I know you do. But for me, it's the five senses where I will sit down in a corner quietly and just, okay, what are five things I see? And I will say them out loud. And I sound, I'm pretty sure I sound like an idiot because I'm just talking to myself in the corner, and then what are four things I hear? And I'll say them. Sometimes I'll even write them down, and I guess that's a form of journaling. I digress. But I'll go through all five senses and do them, and then I feel just such a different wavelength around me because I've altered the biochemistry in my brain from anxious and hyper focused and hyper function to now unlocking those serotonin and dopamine chemicals, which have changed the makeup of my brain at the moment, and I'm able to better focus on the to-dos that I have, and I don't sabotage myself by procrastination or whatever neurodivergency things will happen as a side effect. So I think, understanding the power of choice and understanding that we have a choice in everything we do is really the key to start mindfulness, and then mindfulness is the key to unlocking joy.
So what's really neat about all of that, and I love the use of power, empowerment, powerful, simply because whatever, you're either in power or you're out, and the bottom line is that sometimes all you have the power to do is to change what you're doing. So for instance, if you're sitting and you're thinking and you're dwelling on something that's not going well for you or a loved one or something of that nature, or something comes up, and now all of a sudden you've got all of these thought distortions that are going on, and they are, and your thrownness is going to be to try to fight them, and like that doesn't matter, and some kind of a logical response to it. No, just stand up and jump up and down, going ah for about 30 seconds, and then sit back down and see how you feel afterwards. Seriously works. Now
Screen
don't
therapy is actually a thing.
yeah, don't you don't have to necessarily scream, but if you do, cool. And please don't do it in a crowded room because they're going to come and
Oh, that's where the real fun is. Come
yeah,
on, where's your sense of adventure?
well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not as young as you are, so I don't have as long to live it down. So
Oh, stop.
I got to tell you, the fun part of all of that is that everybody's felt like doing that, and I guess if you were to demonstrate that, all your friends would start doing it, right?
So there's actually scream therapy there, and there's several spots in Connecticut where they get together as a collective, and it's pre-organized and it's led by usually either a naturopath doctor or a therapist of some sort, and they'll go out into an open field and she'll do vocal exercises to get you warmed up, and then literally will just tell you to like scream, and it can be very cathartic for people to just be in this collective group where everyone is just so wrought with whatever that emotion is for them, that and it just grows with intensity. Where I went with a friend of mine last year, and we both ended up like on the ground like holding each other crying because it was just so powerful and intense. But I felt, 10 pounds lighter leaving there, and I didn't expect to cry, and not everyone cries, that's fine. I'm a crier anyway. I cry over everything. But to just have that like huge relief and power, again, it comes back to power over what you're feeling or not knowing that you're feeling, and forcefully have an outlet for it. It was really incredible. So
Yeah.
look it up. There's some real scream therapies out there.
So let's talk about maybe four or five different practices that people can do that will allow them to interrupt. You're never trying to, forcefully change whatever state you're in. You want to interrupt it. And the reason
Or
for that is
avoid. You don't want to avoid either.
100%, because avoiding is the same thing as fighting it. They're just, back of the hand, front of the hand. And most people who think that they're good at dodging, their emotions, no, they're putting a place where they're going to come back up when you don't expect it. So allow for them to be here, and at the same time make a choice to do something to interrupt it. It will come back and remind you later at an appropriate time. Don't worry about it. But you can stand, do it. If you can sit there and just kind of change from what it is, count backwards from 20. And each time you interrupt with a thought, go back to 20 and count backwards from 20 to 1. And do
Mm.
that all the way until you can do it without having an interrupting thought. Now, that is very, very difficult for some people. And this is kind of a senior thing to do. And what I mean by that is that standing up, jumping up and down, or screaming are probably easier and more accessible to most people when you're first getting started. But if
Sure.
you can discipline yourself to do this, counting back from 20 to 1, it's also a great way to fall asleep at night too. I know
Mm.
a lot of people say, I have a hard time. I'm doing great until I lie down and put my head on the pillow. And now all of a sudden I'm wide awake again because there's all of these unfinished things. There's all of these unmet needs. There's all of this, breakdown stuff that I'm looking forward to. And I'm afraid I'm going to forget it if I go to sleep or some other reason like that. Count backwards from 20 to 1 until you get there all the way. The second time you do, you will not get to 1. You'll most likely be asleep somewhere in the middle.
I like that. I'm not a journaler, as I've previously mentioned, but I always keep a notepad and a pen by my bedside because if I'm struggling to sleep because my mind is racing, or if I wake up in the middle of the night and then I'm struggling to get back to sleep because I'm having some sort of stressor that woke me up in the middle of the night, I will sit up and I will turn the light on and I will jot down everything. I will just do that string of consciousness to brain dump. And then I'm usually able to go to sleep because it's getting it out of my head and on paper. I've made a to-do list for myself the next day, essentially. Because it's not just, oh, I'm worried about some arbitrary thing, but like, oh, I have to find this paperwork or that paperwork or pay this bill or call this person or send this email. And I'll ruminate on it and keeps me awake. So just having a pen and paper next to my bedside, write the list down as I think of it when I have that, like, oh, I can't sleep now. And then that usually alleviates that. Another thing I really enjoy is it's called tapping or EDMR. So it's like finding your pressure points, and then it's a rhythmic tapping. There's one between like your thumb and your forefinger. There's a pressure point here, and it's just a rhythmic tapping. And if you can look up how to do it and where to do it exactly on your body, but there's several tapping points, and you'll just tap as you're having the thoughts, and then your brain will eventually focus on the tap versus on the thought, and that will self-soothe. I put a rubber band around my wrist, and when I'm having either negative self-talk or catastrophic thinking, I'll snap the rubber band one or two times, and that will break that thought of consciousness. And then I'm able to reframe that, like, oh, ow, that hurt, I shouldn't be doing that. It's almost like aversion therapy. um, there's an old saying that goes, take the baby out or put the baby in water. The same applies to when you're an adult. So they say, like, when a baby won't stop crying, you either put the baby in the bath or you take the baby outside. Very true things, but you do it for yourself as an adult. Go take a hot shower. Go take a cold shower. Go outside, go for a walk, even if it's just for a few minutes. Just some of that, like, change of scenery, change of tactile sensation is enough to interrupt those thought processes and create that mindfulness, because mindfulness is a sensory experience. And when you're able to ground yourself to your senses, you're able to change your thinking.
So you used a term. Could you say the four words EDMR? What does that stand for?
I don't exactly remember. If only there was a way. Let me see.
Perfect. So while
Mhm.
you're doing that, that's a good thing to teach children as well, by the way. And
Yes.
I've seen very successful school teachers take kids through a process of teaching them how to tap their shoulder exactly the same way. there's a
Eye
spot.
movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, excuse me.
That's
So
good.
it's used for post-traumatic stress disorder relief. And there's, lots of people who are trained in how to do it, but there's stuff you can do for yourself. There's like forehead, hand, shoulder, like you were saying, but eye movement desensitization reprogramming.
I like it. And we all know Steven Tyler from Aerosmith. He wrote a book called "Is the Screaming in My Head Bothering You?" Um,
I
it,
didn't know that, but I like that title.
Yeah, no, it's definitely what you would expect from somebody who spent 40 years putting alcohol and drugs into his body. There's a strong correlation between being dysfunctionally thinking and having using substances, because the substances take away your ability to be present. You don't have the ability to be present if you've got a hangover and a headache. And you also don't have it if you're suffering from anxiety of when are you going to have your next your next beer, or whatever it is. Now, these things by themselves, there's nothing wrong with it. You kind of set your own pace and all the rest of it. But if you're looking at something you can remove from your life that you're doing, try taking 2 or 3 days and just see what happens, after the second or third day with a clear head. See if that makes a difference for you. And again, it's going to be a thing of choice. When you choose to do a particular behavior, you get all the good stuff and you get all the bad stuff that comes along with it.
Definitely. And it's not a blanket, application. Like what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for the next person. For me, sobriety has been a game changer, and that's certainly been a recent development. Where I had times where I was like, no, I'm more than capable of managing that, and oh, I'm not self-medicating, and I can enjoy it and not get drunk and still process and be mindful. And yes, while that is true, I am better at the mindfulness. I am less stressed. I am sleeping better. I am making better conscious eating choices with the choice of the removal of that added, implication of drugs and alcohol. And it's a numbing agent. It's a downer. It increases your likelihood of depression. It increases the likelihood of anybody who is at risk for suicidal ideation. And if you're working to make a concerted effort to choose joy, which it sounds like, the people who are listening to this want that, they're choosing that, then just understand that that's a potential you may have to grapple with. And it took me some time to come to terms with that choice, and that's okay. But changing how you're eating and changing your physical activity and changing your self-talk, talking to yourself kindly, that's a huge one for me. And doing positive affirmations and self-hypnosis to reprogram that trauma in myself, those things were much easier for me than the removal of the drugs and alcohol, and that came much later. So it doesn't matter the order in which people do it in. Understand that there's choices, and one of those choices is knowing yourself well enough to know where to start.
I like that. And back to the title of that book, it takes courage to face the screaming in your head. We called it bees for the longest time. But the deck is stacked against us. Okay,
Mm,
psychologists say we have somewhere between 80 and 100,000 thoughts per day, random thoughts. Some are perceptible to us, some are messages that are going to our limbs and our neural links, and we don't even know it's there, but we're being affected by them. I think the main thing to remember is that most of them are not necessarily our most inspired thinking. Okay,
mm.
most of them are definitely downers. They are things where we're actually reinforcing by having the same thought over and over again, or fighting it, or um, ignoring, or whatever. uh, these thoughts can be a place to dwell for hours at a time, unless there's another thing you can do. And clearing your mind at some point, the meditation, sometimes just sitting quietly. Sometimes there's a thing called focusing, and there's a National Institute of Focusing. And this is something that psychologists got together and they did some experimentation for working with their therapy clients for a lot of years, for many years. And what they found out was that the folks who ended up winning, as they call it, are the ones who they talk differently. The things that they talk about are less, in an undescribed problem sort of a thing, but they're more definite in terms of their own access to the feeling and how it shows up for them and how it presents. So focusing is kind of taking some quiet time, in a dark room, on your bed with your head on the pillow, just some place where you can just calm, and then be present to everything else. And then you kind of reduce your state of awareness to what's going on outside you. Not as deep as meditation would be, where the meditation is just focusing on an abstract, such as a sound, or some sort of a thought that you have over and over and over again. There's no chanting or anything like that. It's to sit quietly until your body is in a state where you can ask it a question. And this is
Mm.
where you're actually engaging in a conversation with your subconscious, and you're asking your body a question. So, what's the main thing right now? And then you sit quietly and you wait to see if there's some kind of a response. And intellectually, you're going to have several different, like, I had a fight with my boss today. I kicked the dog, whatever it is. No, probably not that. Okay. So then you say, okay, those are good. They can go sit by the side. And now I want to know what is the real main thing at the moment for you. And then sooner or later, what's going to happen is you're going to get an answer to it that's not coming from your mind, but it's actually coming from your body. And
Mm.
when it resonates and you can hear the response to it in language, and it's actually the correct response, the one that the body is really experiencing, it might be something like, I haven't had anywhere near enough exercise. I haven't had enough water, or it might be, I really need to see this person as soon as I possibly can. It could be a number of different things, but however it gets languaged, you're going to know, because there's going to be a felt shift. And that means basically a felt sense, which is going to cause a shift in your body. Sometimes when you're sitting someplace, it's like a physical aha, you know,
It's so
the most.
interesting that you say that. So, a lot of the work I do with some of my grieving individuals is a similar version of that, but it's a reverse engineering. And we'll talk about like grief and where it resides in your body, because grief can be such a large, ambiguous emotion, and for each person grief shows up differently. So asking people to just take a moment and take 3 deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, and I'll demonstrate that for them. And then, where are you feeling your grief? If you really had to think about it, is it heavy in your chest? Is it weight on your shoulders? Is it, you know, emptiness in your stomach? Is it, a hollowing in your heart? Is it a pain in your head? Is it a hunching to your spine? And giving them some tangible things to think about and have them start there. And once we kind of figure out where it is in their body, working to go back from that to in their brain, like, okay, now having that conversation with yourself once you've connected where the emotion is resonating, it's in your chest. There's a heaviness in your chest. Like, okay, let's unlock your chest a little bit. Let's do some deep breathing exercises and let's really think about like what can we do to bring some comfort to that. And it kind of makes people choose to face grief a little bit more head on, that riding the horse in the direction in which we're going.
Yeah.
um, and and then it also helps bring closure to some of that unknown and that ambiguous, and gives them a little bit of control and power back where they then can start making those choices. So it's important to make that correlation between joy and grief through your physical body.
And it's very interesting too, because there's this whole notion of happiness.
Mm.
And so I think I've had some pretty interesting response, to asking a group of people what happiness actually is. Now, everyone will tell you they want to be happy, But most people haven't really given it a thought as to what that would actually mean for them or what it actually is.
Mm,
And it's like the same thing with joy. I mean, it's easy to talk about joy right after you've experienced it. You could expound for hours, right? But when you're not feeling so joyful or you're not feeling so happy, I find that most people are looking for something, someplace, or someone that brings that with them. And
yes.
yeah, it's very similar to a golf swing. Sam Snead once said, if you go out on the golf course looking for your perfect swing and you didn't bring it with you, you're not going to find much.
Well, beyond drinking an Arnold Palmer and playing putt putt, golf metaphors are lost on me. So
Well, essentially, what he was saying is, it's up to you to generate your own happiness.
very true. And I think that our, society is kind of desensitized to the word joy a little bit after the whole Marie Kondo movement, unlocking your joy, where she asked you to go through your whole house and pick up an item. And does it bring you joy? Yes, keep it. No, throw it away. Well, how are you supposed to make those decisions if you don't know what joy is? And it's that intrinsic feeling of just in the moment. I don't like the word bliss, but it is just a peacefulness and an appreciation and a gratitude and a real, true, unadulterated happiness that can't be explained in any other way. And you'll know it when you feel it. You really will. It can't be forced. It can't be faked. It can't be bought. But certainly, that is a thing I learned after being widowed, and probably one of the hardest lessons I've learned, that you have to fill your own cup, and that's where real joy and real happiness comes from, is knowing that you are enough, and you have to be able to give yourself that happiness, because if you're always seeking it from other people or other things, it's not real. It is a placebo.
I like that. And here's another truism for you. Joy isn't and happiness aren't something that you do; it's something you be. So
Mm.
if you constitute yourself as a joyful, happy person, and you start investigating what that looks like for you personally, what you'll end up doing is you'll start smiling at a lot more people. You'll be intentionally noticing when people aren't smiling around you. And then what you'll do is you'll smile. Total stranger, may not even speak the same language, but that's something we all do exactly the same way, as the song says. But my point is, you will start by causing something with a ripple going out to the universe, and it's going to give it back to you only a lot more.
I think the other component to joy and to happiness is letting go of the things that don't affect you or don't have effect on you. So those, judgments and those perceptions, like you get angry at the person who cut you off on the highway. Like ultimately, did it affect your commute? No. Ultimately, was it a personal attack? No. So let it go. Wave them on, wish them well, hopefully they have a better day, and get on with your life. The barista who was snarky with you, like, is that personal? No, let it go. People in my orbit like to bring up drama from people I went to high school with. And I'm like, I don't talk to most of them. uh, it's fine. I don't care. Wish them well, wish them no harm, but also it's of no never mind to me. So I can receive the information and release it back out into the world just as easily, because it doesn't impede me. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't. So I just don't let it impose upon me. And I'm allowed to be joyful and choose joy, because I'm not bogged down with drama, and I'm not bogged down with, just unnecessary, what's the word I'm looking for? Not aggression, but just unnecessary friction in our lives. Just let go of those things that you can't control and that don't affect you. Unless it directly correlates to me, well, so be it. Like, let the water waves move.
It sounds like what you're talking about is almost like a malady, you know, when when you're not joyful and you're looking for it to come from another person, place, or thing. You're looking for that, and your attention is not on being present or noticing or having anything to do with the life going on in front of you. And this is the other thing that is so prevalent, that in terms of interviewing folks and actually um, just asking a question, what are you thinking about now? And them honestly over time in an interview answering, about 80% of the time, they're either thinking about something that's going to go on in the future or something that has happened to them in the past. And out of the remaining 20% of the time, they're either dreaming about something that they want, or maybe 5% of the time, they notice something new in the room, you know? So these
Mm.
are folks that do not have access to making a choice to be present. And there's so many different ways to say it. And the whole notion of mindfulness and intentional noticing and all the rest of that, you can come up with your own thing. It's called being here, you know? It's called being playing heads up ball. It's called, you know, being ready to be ready. And if you think about all the people that are highly skilled professionals, and no matter what they do, their ability to be at attention and on purpose in any situation, once they've been taught how to do that, it doesn't matter where they are. You can take somebody who is a professional baseball player and you can put them into a situation where there's an emergency on shipboard, and they will swing into action and do things that are very appropriate in the moment, and they'll look around for visual and other cues that they're on the right track or there's something different they need to be doing. They will make it up on the spot and they will be in action.
Exactly. And that comes from choice, it comes from power, and it also comes from self prioritization. And I think that that's the component that a lot of people miss with experiencing joy. We all think, oh, if I'm prioritizing myself, then I'm being selfish. Well, to fill your own cup and to find joy from yourself and not these external sources, you do have to be a little selfish sometimes. And that's not in the, you know, exclusion of others or to the hurting of others, but you have to learn how to care for yourself and to find the joy yourself and be comfortable with yourself, and you know be comfortable being alone, and that and still be joyful. And that's really the key for me and the people who are grieving, is teaching them to be comfortable in being alone, is really where that starts for them. Because once they get comfortable with that and they master that, they master mindfulness and they master the ability to be unencumbered by the fleeting relationships that can come. And it is okay because they're joyful regardless of all the other things that happen. Once you have a loss that is big enough to affect grief, then you understand in a way there's nothing left to lose. You've already lost something so super important to you, and that is the worst thing that you could experience in that moment. So how do you bounce back from that? Well, you bounce back from it by finding joy. Okay, well, that sounds pretty arbitrary. How do I do that? Well, you have to be good at being alone. Okay, well, how do I do that? Well, you have to be mindful in the moment and be present in the moment and fill your own cup and take care of yourself and prioritize yourself. So it's you have to boil it down like an onion, peel it back in the layers, and find, like you were saying before, that root cause of what you're feeling and experiencing. Same idea, but the root cause is, how do you find joy? Well, your root cause is being comfortable being alone and filling your own cup, finding joy for yourself from yourself.
I like that, and there's two takeaways that I get out of what you just said, Kate. It's really great. There are some things that you can do in the moment that you'll be okay with that work out, and there'll be other things that you do in the moment that don't work out. And the thing that distinguishes when it works more than not is your ability to, master the habits, to be in that position where you can notice that it's time to be mindful, that it's time to fill
Mm.
the cup, and that you've got the grounding and you've got the habit of being able to take care of yourself in the moment to be effective and get whatever you're working on in the moment complete. And I think that's what separates a professional. Like I was talking about a baseball player, it could be a traffic cop. Paying attention is something you really have to do well if you're standing in an intersection with 500 cars a day going by. So
Mhm.
so the whole notion of deciding when it's not an emergency situation that you're going to work on yourself, you know, and put yourself into a position where you've got a fighting chance when things go south, because I guarantee you, you got other plans, but they're going south when you least expect it or least want them to. And again, life is about how well you can get back on the court and how quickly you can get back into a life of effectiveness and joy, true joy, as opposed to one that's affected and that you put on like a uniform or something of that nature. It's cool to do that, to trick yourself into like, I need to do this more. And this is what it sort of felt like to me before. And I got to do this.
Yeah,
That's
you dress for
another
the job you
technique.
want.
Exactly. Yeah, well, yeah, there's all of that. And the whole point of having joy is, do you want it? Make a
Mm.
decision that it's an important part of your life, and you want the goodies that come along with it. You want the reduced cortisol and all the rest of that sort of thing. And cortisol is a crippling, and it can be a very crippling part of your anatomy. It leads to obesity. It leads to depression. It leads to stomach and gastrointestinal problems. And there are things that you can do to just completely release all the cortisol in your body. Simple breathing exercises, as you were saying earlier, Kate.
It comes
Box
down to self-care, and self-care is so much bigger than, getting the pedicure or taking the bubble bath or going on a shopping spree. But real self-care, and I know we've had this conversation before where I did my holiday workshop around a lot of self-care. Um, Real self-care that is intrinsic to joy and that, you know, alleviation of the stress hormone is about learning who you are, establishing healthy and safe boundaries, going to therapy or finding a therapeutic modality that works for you, and working on those traumas and those trigger responses that are maladaptive, removing those negative self-medicating things as a choice, as a health choice that is a way to take care of yourself, going for a walk, getting exercise, eating. I'm not saying people have to eat salads all day every day, because that doesn't work for everyone. But if
right,
all you eat are things that contribute to depressive behaviors and depressive chemicals in your body, then you're setting yourself up to fail. So, part of taking care of yourself is treating yourself as if you were taking care of a child. You are caring for a child now. And if you were in charge of this child, would you feed it Burger King every day, all day? Well, no, because that's not good for it. You would make sure it brushed its teeth and got 8 hours of sleep and took regular showers and got outside for exercise and did the activities they enjoyed, whatever those be, and hung out with friends and, you know, had treats occasionally, but also like ate well balanced meat. So take care of yourself. Self care is taking care of yourself in the most rudimentary sense. And that is the precipice to the foundation of unlocking joy.
so it really strikes me, Kate, that for some people out there who are listening to this, they're going to say, yeah, 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 that's all well and good. And I don't have time for that.
Hmm.
There's a piece of this which is where you have to really sit down and marvel that the miracle you are, marvel at it. This is a an unbelievable, can't happen kind of odds sort of thing that you're here right now.
Mm.
Seriously, if you pondered the number of people that have ever lived, and the number of times that people have had sex and nothing came from it, and the number of all the other things that go along with it, you're against all odds. You are absolutely a freaking miracle. So
I'm an
now,
anomaly. Yes.
yeah, I mean, mostly it doesn't work, right? So it's working a lot right now because we got a critical mass here that just keeps, spinning it up. But that doesn't mean that life is worth less. It actually means that life is worth so much more. And so
Mm.
this is another one of those choices. You have to decide, not only are you worth it, but you deserve it. You've got a birthright of joy. You've got a birthright of happiness. You have a birthright of being everything that you've ever dreamed of. you've also got a birthright of figuring out how to utilize your environment and your friends and the rest of this world to empower you and keep you empowered on that trip and bring them along with you. One of my favorite
Mm.
quotes lately is, I helped a man climb to the peak and I noticed that I was on top too.
That's beautiful. And I think for people who struggle with self worth, like I do, whether that be from trauma or just biology, knowing that if you can't talk yourself into doing it for yourself, what advice would you give your best friend or your relative or your loved one? What would you tell them if they were telling you these things or if they were asking your opinion on this philosophy? And then start practicing that. If you have to give yourself a little bit of an out of body experience in order to start the motion of it, just know that you don't have to necessarily see your own intrinsic worth to start this, but it's a muscle that you have to exercise and it comes with practice. And the more you do it, the more you'll get better at speaking kindly to yourself and understanding that you have worth. And then when you begin to experience the joy on a real chemical level, then you'll understand your worth because it will happen. You will feel it. But you just have to start. That's a choice, but you just have to start.
So here's the funny part of it is you can pick a lot of behaviors that are going to end up being addictive to you, up to and including scrolling on TikTok. Okay,
Hmm.
so there's all of this associated endorphins and dopamines and all the rest of that. And what Kate just talked about, like you do this, and there's a science to that too, and the nature of learning follows this four-step process. You start off at the beginning and you are unconsciously incompetent and you're not losing any sleep over it. You don't even know that you're incompetent in a particular area, and why would you care until it comes into your life, and now all of a sudden you notice that you're just not really good at something, but golly, what if I could be, right? What would the possibilities be? And now you're consciously incompetent. And what do you do about that? You start doing what Kate said. You start doing, practices that are good for you. You start getting to the point where now all of a sudden you can do it. You've got a routine and you're taking care of yourself. The self-care aspect of it kind of disappears because you are now consciously competent. And not only are you in a position where you can teach other people and you can call up and you'll always remember exactly what to do because you know this is something that you can fall back on and you know it. And then you get to the point where you're so far beyond that and looking into other things, and it's just a habit and part of who you are. And that's when you're unconsciously competent. And at that point, you can stand on this, and this is what goes into effect. This is what gets called out in an emergency. This is what happens when there's a super huge breakdown in your life that no mere mortal who hadn't prepared for it could possibly ever deal with. This is where you find out whether your work, you know, in any area needs any buffing up, because you can drop back into the consciously, competent stage again, where I know how to do this and I didn't do it. It shows back up for you. You know what I mean?
You
We've all
develop a self efficacy, that belief in your own ability to do. And it just has such an incredible ripple effect, right? So when we practice that self-care and then that leads to mindfulness and that leads to systemic change and that leads to joy, we are now bringing joy out into the world and giving it to other people. It makes us better coworkers, it makes us better parents, it makes us better humans. And then we inspire other people who go, God, you used to be such a miserable bitch. Why are you not that way anymore? And then you teach people and they, it's a wild perspective for me to be that, mousy, unsure, insecure girl in high school to now be on several podcasts a week toting self-care and joy. I'm like, oh, if I could talk to middle school and high school me, I would have thrown rocks at me. But the younger me would be throwing rocks at older me, going, "You are so full of baloney, it's not even funny." But it's just wild to me that we have the power of choice to really change who we are intrinsically Not that we necessarily need to change, but the capacity for evolution is there by a sheer choice and by a sheer practice and by a sheer acceptance. And so it starts with self efficacy, your own belief in your ability to do. You don't have to do, you don't have to be a master at it day one, but just believe that it's a possibility. And that's where it starts.
So you're really pointing to how happiness and joy show up all the time. And Einstein had his theory of relativity that revolved around, you know, I'm not going to go there, but how long is an instant? Ask somebody who just put their hand on a hot stove, and how long is eternity? Ask two lovers, to tell you how long they've been in love. And
Mm,
and the main takeaway I think for that I'd like for you all to consider is that all of a sudden you just are involved in these activities. I mean, we've all done things like reading a book, playing a game with kids. I don't know what was for you personally, but when you looked up, it was certain time, and then all of a sudden you looked up again, it was 4 hours later. You know,
mm,
and that it gives you that little smile, like Kate just came out with, where there's this kind of like,
mm.
holy mackerel, that's I mean, the world didn't change and shake and everything, but golly, I've just been having a good time, haven't I? you know? And there's something that's really kind of special about being a receiver of that moment. And we really owe it to ourselves to give ourselves that moment as frequently as possible.
I agree with that. That's give yourself permission to experience joy when it comes along, because that's another place that we all struggle with is we tend to shut ourselves out from it. Either we're not entitled to it, or we don't recognize it to be joy, or we're too busy doing other things. But but part of that will come with the mindfulness and all of that stuff. But just give yourself permission to really just relish in that moment of joy when it happens. And as a widow and as someone who's grieving and does loss work for a living now, it's so much sweeter in a way that I wouldn't have expected. And I can tell everyone out there who's listening that joy is possible, and immense joy and immense sadness can coexist, and just open yourself up to the possibility of joy.
Yeah. And that's actually kind of an interesting way to point to Nietzsche, who said, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," and he was completely misunderstood.
Mhm.
What he actually was saying is that you have to experience deep lows to ever experience equal highs. And essentially what he was saying is that you should embrace whatever trials and tribulations that there are in life, because that is something that you will transcend, and it becomes part of who you are now, and you'll never have to deal with transcending that again. So that
Without
each
darkness there cannot be light.
100%, 100%. And to learn how to love, you have to learn how to have a broken heart. And
Hmm.
when your heart is broken to that level, you now not only appreciate, but you now understand. It's in your body from now on. It is trauma and experience last a lifetime. That's why you can get on a bicycle 35, 40 years later and still be able, in a moment or two, be able to pedal it down the road. It stays with you. And quite frankly, the neat thing about all of this conversation is that whether you realize it or not, the quality of your life is directly going to correspond with two things. First of all, what comes out of your mouth, and number two, your capacity to love in such a way that's without any need for keeping track or keeping score, and is totally unconditional. When
Mm,
you got those two things working for you, you will spend very little time being in the breakdown lane, and you're going to spend most of your time cruising in the passing lane. And
that's
that's
it.
that's pretty much what life has to offer. So in terms of wrapping up, Kate, this has been a wonderful hour. Did you notice how quickly it went by?
I know. I just looked at the clock and I was like, "Sheesh, that went fast." But
Yeah.
again, I'm having such a joyful conversation with you that I didn't even really pay attention. No, I always love talking with you, Bill.
Vice, yeah. The feeling is completely mutual. And for those of you at home, Kate and I have just gotten into each other's orbit probably since October, I think was the first time that we actually met.
Yeah.
And if you want to know if there are any accidents in the world, I just happen to have a Facebook invite, where it comes up, do you know this person? And of course, I didn't know Kate, but it said she has 4 mutual friends, or many more than that. But long story short, I had to give her a Facebook ad. The next thing I know, a couple weeks later, or maybe the next week, we're out to dinner, and here we are, 4 months later, having these great conversations about empowerment. Kate, did you have anything that you wanted to say to kind of like wrap this up from your end?
Yeah, I just think that one, I'm grateful for the opportunity as always to chat with you and to share my perspective with the listeners out there. And if people are interested in learning more about me and what I do have my own podcast that is on the Exvadio Media Network as well. So Happily Never After, where that is focused on turning the page after spousal loss. I have a co-host there, and we talk about the widowhood experience. Or people can visit my website, which is www.otwwb.com. On Tuesdays, we wear black, where people can reach out and learn more about me. But I invite people to just do some self examination and some research, because I'm a big research fan, and I have to have a little bit of the science and the what behind you know, the where, if you will. Um, so do some research about the tapping and the various coping modalities, and knowing that the capacity to love unconditionally starts with self-love, because you won't be sourcing that love from other people and you won't be expecting it in return when you can just fill your own cup and you can just give love without the expectation of love. And that's really such a different kind of an experience. And if I can do it, having lost the way I have, and I know you've had loss, if we can do it the way that we can, then it is possible for everybody else out there. So I invite the listeners to just give it a try. And then I'd love feedback from them, if whether that be comments or messages, to hear how it's going or what worked for them. So just with gratitude, I'm always grateful to be here with you.
Thank you, Kate. Great message. And folks, I'll tell you what, the more you hang around Kate, the more you'll want to hang around Kate. So definitely take her up on her offer and go see her on her website. I also want to leave you with one more thought. We are lighting the candle, a world that works, and our conversation is empowerment. And I want to ask you personally, from me to you, will you accept a request? I'd like to have you call, text, write a letter, send a carrier pigeon, whatever it takes. Reach out to at least 4 or 5 of your friends this week and let them know that your world works because you know they're out there, and it makes a big difference to you that they're here. They've changed your life, and they need to know that. Will you do that for me?
Absolutely.
Okay, and you at home, you're signed up too. I heard you. You all said you would.
I heard it too.
So that's it for us for this week. And thank you again for coming in and listening. And thank you for your great questions from home. We really heard them and we really love you. So have a great one, and bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch every episode as well as the rest of the network at exvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.